Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started so we won't run out of time. Welcome everyone. I'm Michelle Garner.
And I'm Peggy Sutton. So there's been a little bit of change of presenters for you guys this afternoon. I will be filling in for Miss Olympia Scott. But Michelle and I both are inclusion and behavior support specialists at DeKalb, and we are so excited about being here with you guys today.
Yes, we're honored to participate in this opportunity with you for this year's Black Child Development Institute Conference. Thank you for joining us today on this webinar focusing on reducing suspensions, how SEL programs can transform staff, children, and families. We know that the use of exclusionary practices often leads to burnout and creates a negative school environment. Exclusionary practices also creates childcare and education instability because children cannot be at school while the parents are working. Today, we're going to explore social emotional learning impact on the reduction of suspensions and expulsions. Also, we'll discover practical strategies and practices to assist you in implementing social emotional learning into your program to aid in the prevention of exclusionary practices. So before we get started, we're just going to quickly take a look at a couple Zoom features. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but we want to just make sure. The first is a chat box at the bottom of the screen. I know you'll see the chat box. You can click it and type something in if you like. There'll be several opportunities throughout the session for you to give a little nonverbal feedback in the chat box. We'll also be using the reactions tab. You'll see the reactions tab also at the bottom of your screen. The only thing you'll need to do is click on your reaction that matches your response when prompted. So now let's go ahead and get started. So this training is brought to you by the Inclusion and Behavior Support Program at DeKalb. We are a statewide team of specialists, and we support pre-K and childcare programs to maximize inclusion and success for all students. We work with program staff at all levels through training and coaching to promote successful inclusion and social emotional development in children according to the pyramid model, which we'll discuss a little bit today. We're available to provide program-wide trainings related to targeted social emotional instruction practices and supportive practice-based coaching for teachers around classroom practices. We're also available to support program staff through the behavior assessment and intervention process. So if you want to learn more about our supports available across the state of Georgia, please contact the Seeds for Success helpline, and that number is 1-833-354-HELP, and we'll be happy to help you. So let's start by taking a look at the pyramid model. The development of the Georgia Social Emotional Early Learning Strategies, early development strategies for success, or the SEEDS program, is based on a framework of practices. The pyramid is a conceptual framework of evidence-based practices for promoting young children's healthy social and emotional development. The pyramid model provides guidance for early childhood professionals, early intervention personnel, families, as well as other professionals. The pyramid model builds upon a tiered public health approach to providing universal supports to all children to promote wellness, targeted services to those who need more support, and intensive services to those who need them. So as an administrator, you can use the pyramid model during professional development activities and in reflective meetings with your staff. Each segment of the pyramid contributes to a positive program environment for staff, children, and families. So the model is supported at the foundation by an effective workforce. The foundation for all of the practices in the pyramid model are the systems and policies necessary to ensure a workforce able to adapt and sustain these evidence-based practices. Professional development is a large part of the effective workforce foundation. Having a trained staff is important in order to effectively use the positive guidance technique. For many staff members, positive guidance practices may be a new method of interacting with children. Your support is critical for staff members to become comfortable with new ways of thinking about and interacting with children that focus on building positive relationships, even when children engage in challenging behaviors. The bottom tier, or tier one as we call it, is a universal support, and this is for all children. Tier 1 is broken down into 2 levels. There's the nurturing and responsive relationships and the high quality environment. When creating nurturing and responsive relationships, you must build individual relationships with children, staff, and families. When they feel acknowledged and valued by you, they'll be more resilient when interacting with children. Staff members will view you as a supporter in their work with children. Your support in them creates trust as they engage in problem solving and teaching children what to do instead of focusing on challenging behavior. As an administrator, you're also entrusted to ensure that the program environments are safe and secure for children, staff, and families. You are able to provide information about how to obtain necessary resources, materials, and equipment to ensure high quality environments in which staff can engage and in nurturing relationships with children and their families. High quality environments include your monitoring of all program spaces, such as clear, welcoming paths into and out of the center, attractive working, outdoor play and recreation equipment, and appropriate furnishings in the classroom. So the next level is the prevention level of the pyramid, or as we call it, tier 2. Prevention represents practices that are targeted social emotional strategies to prevent some challenging behaviors. The prevention level includes the provision of targeted supports to children at risk of challenging behavior. As an administrator, you will guide staff in intentionally teaching children appropriate social skills. The top of the pyramid, or tier 3 as we call it, is the intervention level. Tier 3 is of the pyramid model, describes the need to provide individualized and intensive interventions to the very small number of children with persistent challenging behavior. So as an administrator, you can create a system for staff to use when they have concerns about a child's challenging behavior. Staff members might be in need of training and guidance about how to observe and record information about challenging behaviors so that they can provide objective, data-driven descriptions of children's behavior. You'll also need to be involved as an observer and document behavior, as you are an important participant in planning behavior supports. You play a significant role in working to plan meaningful professional development that will ensure the staff is able to document, understand, and address challenging behavior. So in today's session, we're going to discuss exclusionary practices and explore how they impact children, families, schools, and communities. We're going to discover ways to increase social emotional competence of children, families, and staff to decrease suspensions and expulsions. We're also going to review strategies needed to understand, prevent, and respond effectively to undesired behaviors in the classroom. To get us started, we first need to define exclusionary practices. The School Discipline Support Initiative states that exclusionary practices describe any type of school disciplinary action that removes or excludes a student from his or her usual educational setting. Two of the most common exclusionary discipline practices at school include suspensions and expulsions. These practices are typically used to punish undesired behaviors, deter similar behaviors by other students, and promote more appropriate behavior. In dealing with some of these undesired behaviors, suspension and expulsions have been used to support overwhelmed staff and school systems. So now that we've defined exclusionary practice, I want to give you a chance to you let us know what you consider to be exclusionary practice. When I read the practice, just give me a yes or no on your reactions tab if you think this is an exclusionary practice or not. Calling parents to pick up. What do you think? Is that an exclusionary practice? What about sending to the office? Sending to another classroom? Modified days? What do you think? You think any of these are? Suspension from school, that could be in school or out of school, or expulsion. Let's see. Let's move on and see. Well, it's known that many programs in school use expulsionary practices as a tool when addressing challenging behaviors of children. With this in mind, let's take a look at what are considered exclusionary practices. As you can see, all practices that I just listed are exclusionary practices, right? Calling parents to pick up, sending children to the office, sending them to another classroom, modified days, suspension from school, which includes in and out of school, and expulsions. Some of these practices can seem like a reward to the learner, right? And each one removes the learner from their learning environment and threatens their social emotional development. Over the past decade, high rates of expulsionary and suspensions have steadily increased in early childhood programs. The Center for American Progress analyzed new data from the 2016 National Survey of Children's Health, finding that estimated 50,000 preschoolers were suspended at least once. Another 17,000 or more preschoolers are estimated to have been expelled. It's important for us to note that this is the first nationally representative survey of preschool discipline that includes private preschools as well as public preschools. Private preschool suspensions and expulsion numbers have been known to be twice as high on average as that of public preschool, which means that across all types of settings, the average school day sees roughly 250 instances of preschoolers being suspended or expelled. So if we are trying to solve a problem, do we start where the problem peaks, or do we trace a problem back so that we can prevent it? With the number of suspension and expulsions that are taking place in the early childhood settings, we need to be asking ourselves the question, how can we prevent suspensions and expulsions in our program? As we continue to frame the issue of early childhood exclusionary practices, we'd like to point out that of the school districts with children participating in preschool programs, 6% reported suspending out of school at least one preschool child. Racial disparities in out of school suspensions also start early. Black children represent 18% of preschool enrollment, but 42% of the preschool children suspended once, and 48% of the preschool children suspended more than once. So this data gives us even more reasons to implement practices to prevent suspensions and expulsions. I'm gonna pass it over to Peggy to give us more information.
All right. So now that we've seen some of the data on exclusionary practices and know that we need to start prevention as early as possible, it's important for us to explore some of the reasons that learners are being suspended and or expelled. So challenging behaviors are one reason for exclusionary practices. And these challenging behaviors can thus lead to safety concerns. Undesired behaviors of children may be looked upon as dangerous to themselves or others, and these disciplinary interventions are used to maintain a safe learning environment. Some other reasons for suspensions and expulsions are that the teachers and staff have a misunderstanding of what the behavior is or what it's communicating. With a misunderstanding of behavior taking place, this leads to staff feeling overwhelmed and sometimes maybe even not qualified to handle the behaviors and questioning their teaching abilities. So other reasons for the use of exclusionary practices include limits on time. We all know that we only have just this much time in a day, right? Maybe funding, staffing, resources and materials, and the capacity of supporting staff. So for staff who have limited or even no planning time, it's very, very difficult to provide the planning of needed classroom-wide and those individualized supports to figure out just how to meet the needs of a diverse group of children with various developmental skills, various temperaments, and various learning styles. Limited funding can impact a program or school's ability to provide all teachers time for instructional planning and for creating those needed learning supports. So more suspensions and expulsions occur with large group sizes, higher child-teacher ratios, and lack of supports for teachers with regard to managing challenging behaviors, as well as staff characteristics such as depression, or that sense of job stress. So here we can see the impact of school exclusionary practices described through the preschool to prison pipeline. I'm sure that you guys have heard of this. So this is the process in which students are pushed out of school through out-of-school suspensions, through expulsions, and through those overly harsh discipline, and they're pushed into the prison system. So a report by the Equal Justice Society explains that students removed from the school environment fall behind academically. They are at a greater risk of getting in trouble. They feel stigmatized when they do get to return to school, and they are more likely to drop out and never obtain those high school diplomas. So this is why they are easily led down the path of the criminal justice system. So data from the report shows that students with one suspension or expulsion, one of those, are 3 times more likely to enter the juvenile justice system the following year. And the last consideration that we would like you all to think about related to suspensions and expulsions is disproportionality. Disproportionality refers to a racial or ethnic group's overrepresentation in special education referrals or disciplinary in comparison to the total population of children in the community or the school. So current data shows that disproportionality is likely the most complex aspect of the preschool to prison pipeline that we previously discussed before. The U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights has completed a study, and it's going to help shine some light on disparities in exclusionary practices. So according to the Civil Rights Data Collection Report of 2016, boys receive more than 3 out of 4 preschool suspensions. African American children are 3.6 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white peers. Hispanic and African American boys combined represent 46% of all boys in preschool, but they represent 66% of the preschool suspensions. Preschool children with disabilities and or some social emotional challenges comprise 13% of all early childhood populations, and yet they make up 75% of all suspensions and expulsions. So in order for us to address disproportionality, early learning program leaders should adapt culturally responsive practices that consider the children's background, their culture, and also the intent behind the behaviors. Leaders should encourage critical reflection in challenging assumptions and interpreting, understanding, and reframing experiences. Leaders should embed strategies for preventing and addressing challenging behaviors within the learning program through an SEL or a social emotional learning curriculum. And we should rethink that zero tolerance policy and replace it with data-based processes that analyze behavior. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about adapting a social emotional learning or SEL curriculum later on in our presentation. So according to the 0 to 3 Foundation, young children are being expelled from preschool and childcare programs at an astonishing rate, often because of challenging behaviors such as aggression, tantrums, and noncompliance. So we have discussed several reasons for these practices and have taken a look at what the data is telling us. So from your point of view, what are some common reasons that you have witnessed children being suspended or expelled from learning environments? And if you feel, you may share with us your responses in the chat box. So just think back, maybe what are some reasons you've witnessed children being suspended or expelled? And I'll give you just a few seconds to enter that in the chat box if you wish to answer. I'm sure all of us can sit here and think of instances where we have seen this, or maybe even heard of it before. Reasons that you've seen children suspended or expelled. And that's okay. So you can continue to type in your answers as we move forward if you want to join in. So when we're thinking about the quote that we see here, we can see, and I'm sure those of you that are thinking of responses here, you can see that the majority of suspensions and expulsions are occurring because of challenging behaviors in the classroom and school environment. So now we're going to take a deeper look into the impact of those exclusionary practices on children, but also families, staff, and the community. So first, let's discuss and take a look at what happens when children are excluded and what are they learning from being suspended or expelled. So exclusionary practices prevent children and families from accessing those high quality learning settings. When children are not in the classroom, they're often missing out on needed social and emotional learning that would help support the skill practice needed for them to master classroom expectations. Children miss out on developing close relationships with their teachers. And when children are excluded from their classroom environment, they learn to use behavior to get out of situations that are unfamiliar or unpleasant to them. They also learn to disengage from the learning environment, disengage from their peers, and disengage from their teachers. Children learn that when they misbehave, that they're not worthy of being a part of that classroom community. So these practices, as you can see, can have lifelong effects on children, which include the increased risk of negative mental health and academic impact. So exclusionary practices also place a burden on families. And I'm sure we've seen this too. Families rely on quality early childhood programming in order to work and earn an income. And especially when we're thinking of those single parent households. For families, the impact is having added job stress and financial burdens. If you think about those suspensions and expulsions and having to come get the child and find childcare. They experience the loss of support from teachers that help them understand and support their child. And this can lead to a lack of patience and may discourage our families from using positive parenting practices. So now we're going to take a look at how schools are impacted by the use of exclusionary practices. So exclusion from the environment may lead to disenrollment and higher dropout rates. Schools can have an increase of money that's needed to be spent on interventions and maybe even additional staff. Exclusionary practices create negative relationships with children and their families. In these situations, low staff morale leads to staff feeling inadequate, like they're not able to support these children effectively. And also, schools could experience a loss of highly skilled staff, resulting in higher turnover rates. So there's also an impact on the community when children are suspended or expelled, from school. So in the community, you will see an increase in violence among members that might be lacking that appropriate education and social emotional skill development. Exclusion can lead to higher rates of poverty among affected groups. The learner, the family, the staff, and the community are all impacted when a child is excluded. So it's necessary to put into practice strategies that are going to help prevent suspensions and expulsions.
Thank you, Peggy. Now we're going to invite you to share with us, using the chat box, identify one or two words that you think of when you hear social emotional learning. What are two words that you think of when you hear that? One or two words. Anybody want to chat in and tell me, what do you think of when you hear social emotional learning? I can tell you, I'll give you an example for me. Self-regulation, great, thank you. For me, in my younger years, I thought social emotional learning would stop like in preschool when I was, a lot younger and a lot less experienced. Behavior, absolutely, because it's directly tied. Thank you. Absolutely, please continue to put in your responses. We're gonna move on, but thank you so much. So to help us better understand building friendships and relationships, absolutely, all needed, right? All needed in adult life, feelings. So to help us better understand ways we can decrease the use of exclusionary practices, let's make sure that we are aware of the definition of social emotional learning, right? We'll all be on the same page of what that is. The definition was updated by Castle Ward, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning in 2020. It's broken down into two parts. The first part of the definition states that social and emotional learning, or SEL, as we know it, is the integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young children and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make caring and responsible and caring decisions. So the second part of Castle's definition states that SEL advances educational equity and excellence through authentic school, family, community partnerships to establish learning environments and experiences that feature trusting and collaborative relationships, rigorous and meaningful curriculum and instruction, and ongoing evaluation. SEL can help address various forms of inequity and empower young children and adults to create thriving schools and contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities, right? This definition makes it clear that SEL is a topic that should be taught and implemented in our programs and schools to promote the lifelong success of our learners. So as we continue to take a deeper look at the importance of social emotional learning in children, let's ask ourselves this question. What if we taught social emotional skills with the same priority and intentionality that we do other domains, such as, math or reading? Research has shown us that when evidence-based practices are used to teach social emotional skills, there are short-term, intermediate, and long-term results related to teaching social emotional skills. Students have improved classroom behavior and increased ability to manage stress and depression, and better attitudes about themselves and others in the school. When we create environments that focus on relating to others and building empathy within our young learners, we're supporting the development of membership within classroom programs. This also helps to strengthen relationships. Social emotional learning increases self-awareness and improves the ability to regulate one's own emotions and behaviors. It improves executive functioning skills, which help children and adults to be in a good mind space for learning, acting on directives, and engaging positively with others. Positive environments and strategies support positive behaviors both in and out of the classroom. These positive environments where boundaries are clearly taught and displayed support better attitudes towards learning and promote less stress within classrooms. These environments support children's management in more academic activities and less in activities that may cause harm to them and others. The membership that we create within our classrooms and the social and emotional skills that we teach support children in having a better quality of life. They support the capacity to learn, thereby creating situations where children can achieve better grades and test scores. When we support children in learning how to deal with problems that affect them on a personal level, they're learning how to better navigate the pressures of adulthood. We increase their capacity to respond to stress, improving their mental health over time. They are more likely to engage positively with their community after learning to empathize and support others. In the end, implementing quality social emotional learning programs are actually more cost effective than the costs associated with planning and implementing interventions in response to challenging behavior. So SEL by far is a better financial investment for children, families, schools, and the community. This graph depicts data that shows how SEL programs in school can really impact the lives of children. These findings show that positive results have been obtained from SEL program operating in grades K through 12 across the United States and in several other countries. The research on SEL indicates that one, effective program implementation was connected to better results. Secondly, staff were just as successful with implementing SEL programs as researchers and community members. Next, SEL programs were equally effective for learners with distinctive problems when they first entered the program, such as students showing conduct issues, signs of emotional distress, or difficulty with peer relationships. Next would be interventions were successful for learners of different ages when offered in various school settings, being urban, suburban, or rural areas, and for schools primarily serving ethnically and socially economically diverse learners. To have the greatest chance of success for most students, schools must take a genuine commitment to SEL programs and provide the necessary resources to develop, evaluate, and continuously improve implementation of the program. What happens when children have difficulty learning social emotional skills? Well, they may be unable to pay attention, hard to focus on tasks, or they get distracted, hard time following directions, hard time getting along with others, throwing items, hitting, hurting others, or even themselves. They have a lack of empathy towards others. They could be unable to problem solve social situations, maybe have a hard time controlling their emotions, impulsive behaviors, not connected to lessons, activities, routines, or even to teachers or peers. Lack of understanding of social cues, negative view on life or negative view on themselves, and even hyperactivity. What causes difficulty in learning social emotional skills? Well, lack of responsive relationships, trouble with self-control, communication difficulty, language barriers, mental health issues like anxiety or depression, stressful situations at home, or maybe they're learning or thinking differences that directly impact social skills, like children who have learning challenges like dyslexia or behavior and emotional conditions like ADHD or developmental conditions like autism. Although these barriers may impact a child's ability to tune into their social and emotional learning that is happening around them, they are capable of learning these skills through intentional, systematic, and direct instruction that takes into the consideration their needs, their temperament, and their learning styles. So at this point in the presentation, we want to hear your thoughts and opinions about what you can do as an administrator to support the implementation of social emotional learning in children, teachers, and families in your program. If you could share in the chat box for me. What are your thoughts and opinions about what you can do as an administrator to support implementation of social emotional learning? What do you think you could do as an administrator to support this? Anybody have anything? I know one thing, and I don't know if it's coming, but one thing we mentioned earlier was having those resources. Training staff, absolutely. Having those resources, professional development, absolutely. Because we know a lot of the staff doesn't come to us with the knowledge of how to teach those social emotional skills. Thank you. All right, you can continue to chat in. I'm going to turn it over to Peggy at this point.
All right, thank you, Michelle. All right, so I'm going to read this one little response we had come in. So I'm a coach and consulting, share with the admin to create a systematic approach to dealing with behaviors. That's a great idea as well, Sharon. All right, so moving on. So support the implementation of quality SEL in your program. We're going to be discussing 5 elements that you can implement to help in prevention of exclusionary practices. So we're going to focus on reframing thoughts on challenging behavior, relationships, which we all know is key, connection to the learners, families, and your staff, the school culture and climate. And we're also going to discuss, as you mentioned, some professional development opportunities. So it is important to point out that each step that you see here plays an important role in the successful implementation of social emotional learning, and each element has lifelong benefits for our children and students. So next, we're going to look at reframing our thoughts about behavior and listening to what the behavior is telling us. This is one way that we can begin to prevent suspensions and expulsions. Reframing your thoughts is essentially changing how you think about the challenging behavior. So the way we do this is we start the reframing process by putting aside the notion that children are trying on purpose. They're doing all this on purpose to make us angry or just to manipulate a situation. But when we view challenging behavior as actions children are using to get their needs met, or a way to communicate that there is a needed skill missing, then we will be able to reframe our thoughts about the challenging behavior and respond in positive ways that will meet the child's need for and or nurture those skills that might be missing. So now we're going to take a look at the iceberg. I'm sure plenty of you and most of you have probably seen this, but we're going to look at it a little bit here today. So when we're thinking about preventing those exclusionary practices, it's important for us to recognize that behavior is a form of communication, and there is a need for us to reframe our thoughts about that behavior. So everything that you do, everything that I do, and everything that your learners do happen for a reason. So it has been said that instead of asking, what is wrong with this child, we should be asking, what happened to this child? In nature, as you can see here, we're going to be talking about the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is what you see above the water. Just like challenging behaviors are what we see in the classroom, the tip of this iceberg in this analogy shows the behaviors that children use when they're not able to experience, express, and regulate emotions. They're not able to form those close and secure personal relationships. And they're not able to explore the environment and learn, all within the context of family, community, and culture. Now, the rest of the iceberg, which is hidden right below the surface, and we can't always see it, and sometimes this represents like the bigger portion of things. This is the potential needs that are not being met or the skills that need to be developed. So what is going on that causes this behavior? So like the larger portion of the iceberg that's under the surface, the meaning of these extreme behaviors are often difficult to see and understand. So the student may need to feel safe or feel that sense of belonging. Now, it takes time and effort to understand the intent of a child's communication and then to find new ways to fulfill the need or teach the child other ways to communicate his or her needs. But once we understand that behaviors communicate, we can begin to reframe our thoughts on those behaviors. So that's the first step in reframing our thoughts. So another important aspect of preventing exclusionary practices is building nurturing positive relationships with families. And to show this importance, we're going to refer to a quote from Walter Gilliam, who is the director of Yale's Edward Ziegler Center in Child Development and Social Policy. And he made this statement. He said, "I've seen a lot of kids expelled or suspended. I've never seen an expulsion or suspension where the teachers and parents knew and liked each other." The empathy doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it can buy you time to fix the problem. Now just let that sink in and think about it for a second. Would you kick out your best friend's child? Or would you try your best to work with the family to find a solution to help the child be successful? According to Dan Gartrell, the teacher's goal with respect to the family is to establish and maintain a relationship based on mutual trust. So important. When parents and teachers have a positive relationship and good communication, then many problems can be avoided altogether. And when problems do arise, which we know that they will, they are easier to deal with. So this not only relates to teachers, but all school staff that support the child during the school day from arrival time all the way to dismissal. So to further express the importance of building a relationship with the family, we would like to point out what Michael Fullen and Maria Langworthy state in this quote. Learning is rooted in relationships, and supportive relationships can unleash the potential of every student. Also, James P. Comer states that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So research tells us that the most important thing that we can do is build relationships with the learners, that's right, their families, and your staff. Strong relationships with teachers and school staff can dramatically enhance students' level of motivation and therefore promote learning. So when staff and families have these strong relationships, learners are more academically engaged, they have stronger social skills, and they experience more positive behavior. So therefore, by building and nurturing positive relationships, this is the foundation for supporting the social emotional growth and development of your students, families, and staff. So we talked about families a little bit. But families are not the only group with whom we need to build positive nurturing relationships. As an administrator, it is important to build relationships with students, families, and team members. All of these relationships impact each other and ultimately have a direct impact on how students develop and learn. So we know that our students benefit from forming positive relationships with adults. However, we are going to contend that adults get something valuable out of the time and attention they expend to build these meaningful relationships too. First, as we mentioned earlier, the students we build relationships with will be easier to teach and more compliant. They're going to be less likely to engage in that challenging behavior. Second, teachers are going to feel more positive about their skills and experience higher job satisfaction. And third, adults are going to begin to see that ripple effect of relationship building. And as students learn in the context of these caring relationships with adults, they also will become more skilled at building positive relationships with the other students. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Fischel for a few minutes.
Thanks, Peggy. So connection by involving learners, families, and staff and the community is a big part of implementing SEL into your program. We all need to be a part of it. When each group member mentioned is involved in the implementation process, there'll be greater success and excitement around this SEL learning. Let's take a look at how you can connect learners, families, staff, and the community in this SEL implementation. When learners are directly involved in SEL activities and processes, they'll feel connected and will be more successful in their social emotional skill development. So here you can see a few ways to connect learners. First one is teach how to work with partners and how to work in a group. So being able to work in a group setting is an important life skill, guys. I'm sure we all know that. Students will learn how to negotiate with others, develop leadership skills, and figure out how their own strengths so they can best contribute to the group. Give children lots of opportunities to work with partners. Working with a partner helps them learn to cooperate and builds community in the classroom. Alternate between strategically assigning partnerships and allowing them to make their own choices. Next will be whole class meetings that allow for talk time. Make sure all of your students feel heard. Give children a lot of opportunities, both structured and unstructured, to talk to one another during the course of the day. Check in frequently to celebrate what's working and address things that may need a little tweaking within the classroom community. Empower all of your students with a voice and a vote to give them ownership over their environment. Next, teach children to manage conflict. Use a problem-solving wheel or even a solution kit. This practice allows students to choose from several different solutions that they feel will work as a solution to the problem that they're facing. Next will be foster deep connections between learners. Have your students share thought out through the year about a topic such as cultural background, family traditions, or opinions about a current event. Learning about their classmates will broaden their perspective as they consider that everyone's background and experience is not necessarily the same as their own. Connecting with families might seem a little more challenging when it comes to the implementation of SEL, but these examples will help you as you begin to involve those families. The first one is provide families with the same general SEL concepts that you're presenting to the students. For example, if you're encouraging students to follow a specific process for responding to another's feelings, explain that same process to family members so that they can model it at home. Learn about your students' families, ideally through face-to-face interaction. This will help ensure SEL instruction is culturally responsive and builds on the strength and knowledge of the families. Demonstrate and model the same empathy skills you're helping your families develop. Offer respect and understanding for the unique circumstances of each family. Send home short notes to families when a student has successfully demonstrated an SEL skill, like when another student fell on the playground, just came right over to make sure he was okay. So we've covered connecting with learners and families. Now let's see how a few of the ideas how we can connect with your staff on implementing SEL, because we want to make sure the staff is heard as well. Teacher preparation is key to successful SEL implementation. However, many school staff they don't receive instruction on SEL as a part of their pre-service training. Ongoing professional development training is a critical way to communicate internally about SEL, that ongoing professional development, because it's constantly developing. Researchers recommend that schools form a core team of school and staff administrators to lead the communication and integration of the SEL into school-wide practice. And lastly, school staff may wish to hold regular observation and coaching sessions for each other in order to practice, redefine, and discuss SEL strategies. The creation of a safe, positive environment is the foundation of all SEL efforts, both within and outside of the classroom walls. Positive early learning environments start with you when you create a positive social emotional environment that is built on a caring and responsive relationships. Children can explore and learn. They can't explore and learn. They can't experience joy and wonder until they feel secure. They need to trust their caregivers and know that their needs will be met. Children need adults to establish a relationships by being consistent and responding to their social and emotional cues. When you create a positive school culture and climate, you are assure that all children reach their full potential. When students learn and educators work in an environment that is safe, supportive, and connected, students and adults are more likely to develop the social emotional competencies that they need to be successful. The entire staff believes that every child has the capacity to learn and behave appropriately. The educators understand why children behave inappropriately and why they themselves respond to children's challenging behavior in the way that they do. A positive, caring, welcoming social climate facilitates belonging and learning. The social climate tells everyone in the program which attitudes and behaviors are expected, accepted, and valued. The backbone of a caring social climate is a teacher's warm, nurturing relationship with each child and their family. Though every school and every classroom will implement this principle differently, many choose to implement one or more of the same strategies like these. The first one is greeting students each morning by name and use their names when addressing them in conversation. Next one is using transition strategies for all parts of the day in the classroom and throughout the school, providing multiple ways for students to report, discuss, and work through conflicts. Establishing predictable routines. Arrival time is a great time to start each child and family's day off in a positive way. Having a predictable routine for each part of the day helps children feel safe and trust their environment. Have learners assist in the development of classroom rules and expectations. Providing areas for children to learn how to regulate their emotions and activity levels. So, what does creating a safe and positive environment look like for families? Knowing that their children are safe and taken care of while they are in the learning environment is a big relief to families, right? That's why they seek the care initially. Let's look at some ways that you can help ensure that families feel safe and have a positive environment to be a part of. First one is communication or talking. Bi-directional communication supports for the families. Active listening, show respect for differences. Building these feelings of mutual trust and respect, it can be challenging. Families come to you with different knowledge and experience in child rearing. They may have a different language or even a different culture. So if we assume two things, that the families love their children more than anything and that they're doing the very best that they can, it'll make our partnership more genuine and feel meaningful to the family, the child, and the program. Be sure that you remain sensitive to cultural diversity and acknowledge your own biases. Really important. Remember that the emphasis should be on mutual respect, viewing families as an equal partner and valuable contributor. Next will be cooperation and working together. Last would be awareness of the family's goals for their child. Their priorities for their children may be different than yours. It's something to consider. All right, I'm going to give it back to Miss Peggy to close us out.
All right, thank you, Michelle. So now we're going to discuss how to create a safe and positive environment for your staff. And here are just a few ideas that can be implemented to support that safe and positive environment for your staff. And you guys, I'm sure, probably have other ideas as well, but here are just a few that we wanted to share. So you can create that meaningful parent involvement. Many ways to do that to get your parents engaged. Celebrate personal achievements and good behavior at staff meetings within your program and school. Establish a school-wide social norm that builds on values. Set that consistent discipline. It's important to model the behaviors that you want to see in your school and engage students in ways that benefit them. We want to create rituals and traditions that are fun for students and teachers both. We want to encourage innovation in the classroom. And of course, that professional development for teachers specifically around social emotional learning and development. We want to maintain the physical environment of your school. And this includes maybe an area for staff to regulate, self-regulate, some mindfulness, collaborate with each other, and plan for the children. It's also important to keep tabs on your school's culture and when necessary to make adjustments there. Remember that safe, stable, nurturing school cultures and climates are essential to prevention of suspensions and expulsions of children. So a key to promoting effective program-wide, school-wide SEL is ensuring that all staff members have that initial and ongoing professional learning and support to help that implementing evidence-based SEL practices. So central to effective professional learning for SEL is a need to also promote adult social emotional learning skills and competencies. It is essential that educators have the skills to understand, prevent, and respond effectively to a child's behavior. We want to promote an attitude of staff ownership of the solution as well as the problem. And we can do this by acknowledging each person's unique contribution and personal and professional knowledge while giving staff the opportunities to develop the skills that they need. So we can ask teachers the questions that are presented on this slide, but they're also noted on your handout when you are in the process of creating some professional development opportunities. So research, has indicated that professional development for administrators, teachers, student support staff, and human service providers to ensure the quality of SEL program implementation is, you guessed it, is critical. So Barbara Kaiser shares in one of her webinars how administrators can support their staff with implementing successful social emotional learning within classroom. And some ideas for incorporating professional development are thinking about your onboarding and include social emotional development strategies and supports there. Having regular check-ins. Now, this doesn't have to be a big thing, but 5 to 15 minutes with teachers and whatever fits your schedule, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Maybe identifying some go-to staff that have expertise with providing those social emotional learning supports to children. You could also pair some less experienced people with mentors with some more experience. Use your staff meetings to collaborate about supporting children, which may include some problem-solving supports for children who are struggling. You could include also with this teachers sharing strategies and experiences of working with children, and also allowing teachers to share tips and content from the professional development that they have previously attended. It's also one thing you could look at is allowing teachers to pair up during their planning time to share ideas and resources and support each other. I know that's a really meaningful time for teachers. So the Inclusion and Behavior Support Program at DCAL can support you and your staff in this implementation of SEL. We can do this by providing trainings for your program and classroom coaching. We can also help with the facilitation of the behavior planning process, and we can be a resource to the families and other providers as well. So our program, Inclusion and Behavior Support Program, can provide your professional development through the Georgia PDS system, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, which we offer public webinars from time to time. If you keep up with our website and social media pages, you will see those that you can register for. We also have a helpline that you can contact us for professional development, where we can schedule some private webinars for your staff. And then also, if you would prefer this self-paced modules, you can go through the PDS system and register for our OLLI trainings as well. So many opportunities there for you and your staff. So also available is the intensive professional development through coaching. And for this, we use the practice-based coaching framework. So we coach with teachers, administrators, and even family providers. So this process usually occurs in like a 2-week coaching cycle, with cases typically lasting about 3 months. And we have specialists all over the state that are assigned cases through the helpline based on, their proximity to the program and also their availability. But now let's get into the last prevention strategy that we're going to discuss, and that is behavior intervention. So this is designed to provide that intensive, individualized intervention with those children that have persistent challenging behaviors. Okay, so based on research, behavior support coaching provides a process to help understand and resolve challenging behavior of individual children. So this offers an approach to develop an understanding of why the child is engaging in the challenging behavior, and also provides strategies to prevent the occurrence of the challenging behavior, all the while teaching the child some new skills or replacement skills, as we've heard them called before. So one of the key features of the behavior intervention process for young children with challenging behavior and their families is that commitment to a collaborative team approach. So we're all going to work together to help this child with those needs and skills. Now, at this point, I want to say that we have covered a great deal of information in today's session. And we do realize that it can seem overwhelming. Maybe it's a little confusing, especially when you're thinking of implementing these prevention practices in your programs. But you can remember that the Inclusion and Behavior Support Specialist at DECAL, we can offer you help, advice, guidance, and support as you begin to implement these practices. Or if you need help with the behavior planning support process and the creation and implementation of a behavior plan. So prevent, teach, reinforce for young children is the framework used for supporting programs regarding those persistent challenging behaviors. And our specialists will be able to help facilitate that process on a team with family and providers to create a behavior plan specifically for that individual child. So this level of support is to build program and family capacity. It's not to provide direct support from the specialist to the child. This process is usually a 1-week coaching cycles. We do have specialists that are, again, available statewide that can assist you and your staff on your journey of preventing these suspensions and expulsions. We're going to have our contact information available at the end. Excuse me. So the next 2 quotes are going to help kind of tie this all together and leave us with some good reflective thoughts. The first quote says that we would never send a child home because that child was struggling at reading. We would never send a child home if that child was struggling with math. Why would we send a child home for struggling with social emotional skills? And that was from Walter Gilliam. Again, he's from the Yale University Child Study Center. And this second quote is by Maya Angelou. And she said at one time, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. It's been 15 years or more since the first data on preschool suspension was released. So we've known better for a long time, and it is long past time for us to do better. So that does bring us to the end of our session. We hope that you were able to gather some new ideas, maybe some supports that you can think about as you take on this and embark on your exciting journey of implementing SEL into your program to help reduce the use of those exclusionary practices in your program. So if you have any question about the content of this training, you can always email or call, and we will gladly be able to help you. As you can see here, the SEEDS helpline number is 1-833-354-HELP. And we also have our email is inclusion@decal.ga.gov. And I did see a question, but I do believe that Fischel has answered that. It was if the family needed to be notified. And we enjoyed being with you guys today. We do hope that you gained some new insight and some ideas to take back with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for this presentation, and especially the statistics that, of course, are culturally relevant. I was just talking with a program that they're having some challenges, and I mentioned them contacting you. So now I have even more information to share with them, because it was the same thing. You know, I told them, I said, I don't know that they will do direct intervention, but what they can do is give you some training and some strategies to support what you need. And I think that that to me is needed just as much, if not more, than children actually getting intervention, because oftentimes it's not necessarily the intervention they need, it's the change in the teacher's approach, their attitude, and their strategy. So thank you all so much for the helpful information this afternoon.
You're so welcome. We are very passionate about the work that we do. And there are, you know, like many ways that we can support teachers, even, you know, if it doesn't lead into creating that individual behavior plan. You know, we can coach through some strategies for classroom practices that we have seen helps to minimize that challenging behavior as well. So
And we
anyway,
also do administrative coaching as well.
yes, we do.
So
I have a comment. So you have a child that's, and I'm not trying to be negative because I truly got what you've taught us this afternoon. You know, very, very much I appreciate it. So what I'm saying, I have 2 kids. Okay, I'm not being specific, but you're working with the parents, but it's where these kids are, regardless of what is being done, are hurting other people that creates a whole lot of problems. Because like I had a father that was ready to fight this morning because another child, you know, and this child is consistent so you can't send them home, at least to give the teacher a break for that day, even when they come back with a new thought of how to work with that child. Because now I'll feel bad if I send them home.
yeah, and we definitely understand that. Now, what we're saying is that practices and strategies that we use are successful on most children, and there are children that need more extensive services and need more services than DCAL can offer, but we can also offer those resources to that family. But that's a very small number of children. Most of the times when we come into the environment, we're seeing some things and some practices and just some ways of thinking about behavior that can be changed that make marvelous, you know, changes in the child's behavior, or even the teacher's response to the behavior. So while I definitely understand what you're saying, you know, some children may, you know, it may need to go a step further, but where we come in is we come in to the environment just to kind of analyze the environment and just see if there's anything that we can do differently that can support that child with looking for those appropriate skills rather than the inappropriate skills that they're using.
Thank you.
All right, well, if it's nothing else, I guess that's it. Thank you so much. This was great.
Everyone,
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry. Everyone can feel free to go back to the main session or continue having discussion if you wish.
Let me ask one more question, please. And that question is, how easy or what's the waiting time like when when a center calls in to get this extra help? What's the waiting time like, please?
Are we waiting on each other? We are very responsive as a unit. What happens is once you make contact, one of our supervisors will do an intake with you. And once that intake has been taken, you'll give a little bit of information. They will assign a specialist to your program. And within 24 hours, you should receive a phone call, scheduling a visit, going over your concerns, and things like that. And I would like to point out that right now we are doing a hybrid type thing. So we may, if you're comfortable, we could do an in-person observation, but we would also weed in some virtual visits as well to keep the exposure and in and out of programs down a little bit. But we are very responsive. Wouldn't you say, Fischel? We are, once we have your intake, within 24 hours or less, you will be hearing from a specialist to start the process.
Absolutely.
And we do have supervisors that work the helpline, answering phone calls and emails daily. So it's usually a pretty quick process. That's what we we're oftentimes commended for how responsive we are with programs. So
And
know
we
that-
have to be that way too, because a lot of times people, they don't give us calls until it's a fire. So,
Right.
you know,
we
we're
know that you
responding to
guys are
that.
feeling it. Yeah.
And we would love for programs to give us a call before the fire starts, so that we can, and you know, we can put these practices in place, you know, so that we can avoid some of those fires. So please give us a call. We'd love to come out and help.